So very often when I come back to my breath this year, I think of 3 words that sum up the events of the entire year for me, which are I can't breathe. Whether it's the people with COVID who are struggling on ventilators, people of color struggling against the knee on their neck, people out of work struggling to pay the bills for the month, or people and animals who've been struggling to survive wildfires this fire season. And when I think about these beings who struggle to breathe, I realize very starkly that I can breathe. I'm still alive. And I ask myself, what am I going to do with each breath? How am I going to make each breath meaningful? And how might I be able to support those who have difficulty breathing in whatever way is within my capacity? So these are the big questions I've been sitting with all year. And this morning, let's strive to use each breath well, because we really don't know when the next breath will end. And how marvelous it is that we've met teachings that show us how to use even the breath to cultivate wisdom, to cultivate compassion, so that in any situation, as long as we're breathing, we can transform our minds to be of the greatest benefit to all beings. So I wanted to begin the retreat with a story from a book that I read as a baby Buddhist many years ago. And I feel it captures the spirit of this poem that we're going to be studying this week. And it also reflects how I feel about everything that's been going on in the world this year. And it's from a book titled, "Who Ordered This Truckload of Dung?" Inspiring Stories for Welcoming Life's Difficulties by the Australian monk Ajahn Brahm, who is very well loved for his humorous anecdotes and heartfelt ways of sharing the Dharma. And too, it shows that these teachings on what to do with truckloads of dung are common across all Buddhist traditions. And the title of this story is A Truckload of Dung. So I'm just going to read it to you, and I think you'll see why it relates to this poem. So Ajahn Brahm, A Truckload of Dung. Unpleasant things like coming last in our class happen in life. They happen to everyone. The only difference between a happy person and one who gets depressed is how they respond to disasters. Imagine you have just had a wonderful afternoon at the beach with a friend. When you return home, you find a huge truckload of dung has been dumped right in front of your door. There are 3 things to know about this truckload of dung. 1, you did not order it. It's not your fault. 2, you are stuck with it. No one saw who dumped it, so you cannot call anyone to take it away. 3, it is filthy and offensive, and its stench fills your whole house. It is almost impossible to endure. So in this metaphor, the truckload of dung in front of the house stands for the traumatic experiences that are dumped on us in life. And as with this truckload of dung, there are 3 things to know about tragedy in our life. 1, we did not order it. It's not our fault. We say, why me? 2, we're stuck with it. No one, not even the ones who love us the most dearly, can take it away, although they may try. And 3, it is so awful, such a destroyer of our happiness, and its pain fills our whole life. It is almost impossible to endure. So there are 2 ways of responding to being stuck with a truckload of dung. The first way is to carry the dung around with us. We put some in our pockets, some in our backpacks and briefcases, some up our shirts. We even put some down our pants. We find when we carry dung around, we lose a lot of friends. Even best friends don't seem to be around so often. So carrying around the dung is a metaphor for sinking into depression, negativity, or anger. It is a natural and understandable response to adversity, but we lose a lot of friends because it is also natural and understandable that our friends don't like being around us when we're so depressed. Moreover, the pile of dung doesn't get smaller. What's more, the smell gets worse as it ripens. Fortunately, there's a second way. When a truckload of dung is dumped in front of our house, we heave a sigh and then get down to work. Out come the wheelbarrow, the fork, and the spade. We fork the dung into the barrow, wheel it around the back of the house, and dig it into the garden. This is tiring and difficult work, but we know there's no other useful option. Sometimes all we can manage is half a barrow a day. But even so, we're doing something about the problem rather than complaining our way into depression. Day after day, we dig into the dung. Day after day, the pile gets a little smaller. Sometimes it takes several years, but the morning does come when we see that the dung in front of our house is all gone. Furthermore, a miracle has happened in another part of our house. The flowers in our garden are bursting out in a richness of color all over the place. Their fragrance wafts down the street so that the neighbors, even passers-by, smile in delight. Then the fruit tree in the corner is nearly falling over. It's so heavy with fruit. And the fruit is so sweet. You can't buy anything like it. There's so much. We are able to share it with our neighbors. Even passers-by get a delicious taste of the miracle fruit. So digging in the dung is a metaphor for welcoming the tragedies as fertilizer for life. It is the work we have to do alone. No one can help us here. But digging into the garden of our heart, day by day, the pile of pain gets less. It may take us several years, but the morning does come when we see no more pain in our life, and in our heart, a miracle has happened. Flowers of kindness are bursting out all over the place, and the fragrance of love wafts way down our street to our neighbors, to our relations, and even to passers-by. The wisdom tree in the corner is bending down to us, loaded with sweet insights into the nature of life. We share those delicious fruits freely, even with the passers-by, without ever planning to. When we have known tragic pain, learned its lesson, and grown our garden, then we can put our arms around another in deep tragedy and say softly, I know. They realize we do understand. Compassion begins. We show them the wheelbarrow, the fork, and the spade, and boundless encouragement. Yet if we haven't grown our own garden yet, this can't be done. I have known many monks who are skilled in meditation, who are peaceful, composed, and serene in adversity, but only a few have become great teachers. I often wondered why. It seems to me now that those monks who had a relatively easy time of it, who had little dung to dig in, were the ones who didn't become great teachers. It was the monks who had the enormous difficulties, dug them in quietly, and came through with a rich garden that became great teachers. They all had wisdom, serenity, and compassion, but those with more dung had more to share with the world. My own teacher, Ajahn Chah, who for me was the pinnacle of all teachers, must have had a whole trucking company with a fleet of trucks, delivering dung at the front of his door in his early life. Perhaps the moral of this story is that if you wish to be of service to the world, if you wish to follow the path of compassion, then the next time a tragedy occurs in your life, may you say, whoopee, more fertilizer for my garden. So, this story definitely encapsulates, at least the title, how I felt about this whole year. I mean, I've hardly read the news in the last 7 years since moving to the Abbey. Right? And it's like one day you open your internet browser and it's like, who ordered this truckload of dung? And it just keeps getting higher all year. Shapes of dung that I've never seen in my life. And it's there. And I will say I got trapped for sure in the dung of emotional distress. Unfortunately for everyone in this community, as you well know, I put it down my shirt and my pants and I carried it around. I complained about it. I tried to send it back to Singapore where I come from. Didn't work. And at some point, I realized I have to stop. My personal distress and anxiety is not solving any of the problems in this world. I just smell bad. So then, when you finally get to that place where you're just sick and tired of smelling so bad, then you have to ask, how do we turn this dung into fertilizer? Right? Is there a good gardener's guide for turning misery into manure? Well, look no further. That's exactly what we are turning to this week. So this poem, The 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas by the Tibetan monk Venerable Togme Sangpo, is exactly that. It's showing us the steps, because it's not so easy to put it into the barrel, to wheel it, so many different things to do. Sometimes the dung is hard, sometimes it's soft, and so forth. So all kinds of different ways to work with it. And he lived from 1259 to 1369, so that might feel like it's a long time ago, but you know what? Dung is dung, and it still smells the same today. So these teachings are definitely applicable to our present situation, and that's what we're going to try and do this retreat, to really try and relate it to what's been happening this year and is continuing to happen around us. And in case 6 days really is not that long to go through this amazing text, which is a resource for a lifetime. You'll hear from many different monastics about how they're working with this text. But I wanted here just to point you to two excellent resources, which are commentaries by masters on this poem. One is Transforming Adversity into Joy and Courage. This is Kensur Jampa Tekchok's commentary on the poem, more on the traditional Tibetan style that Venerable Chödrön edited. And the other is Don't Believe Everything You Think, which is Venerable Chödrön's commentary. And it's really precious as it also contains stories from real-life Buddhist practitioners showing how they put each verse into practice in their own lives. So definitely turn to these resources. But in essence, like you heard in the story, the central idea behind this poem, 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas, is that our mind, our way of thinking, is what creates our happiness or misery, or our fulfillment or dissatisfaction. And then just yesterday, Venerable Kunga gave a really nice short talk on this on the Bodhisattvas Breakfast Corner, so that's another resource to turn to. And so the central idea is, instead of pointing the finger and yelling and screaming about this dung on your doorstep, the point is to figure out how to turn your mind, how to see it differently, see it as fertilizer, use it in a different way. And that's what is actually going to help us in times of difficulty, instead of blaming the world, to work with our minds and transform the way we see ourselves and our situation. And then instead of getting stuck in non-beneficial states of mind like anger, despondency, we find the resource inside to grow good qualities like love, compassion, equanimity, joy, and wisdom, which we can then share with everyone around us. It's the abundant fruit of our practice. For sure, this is not easy, but I will say I have a lot of confidence in these teachings, mainly because I feel I read about or I see the living example of practitioners who've put this into practice, whether it's Venerable Chödrön herself or all her Tibetan teachers. I find myself especially inspired by them. Just seeing His Holiness the Dalai Lama's incredible example that he holds no anger toward the Chinese government. I mean, people who have basically destroyed your country. Everything you love about your culture is oppressing your people and so forth. He's not angry. All I hear is he wants them to learn the Dharma and to benefit them. It's like, wow, how do you get your mind to that place? And also we hear so many stories of the Tibetan monastics who use their time in prison to do retreat. I think I've heard stories where, it was time for them to be let out and they said, no, I'm still doing retreat, and they closed the prison door. Who just see the world in such a different way, where what seems like totally horrific difficulties become just part of growing, another part of their practice. Let's just keep going on the same path, unwavering that way. Yep, we hear about monastics whose greatest fear was losing their compassion for guards who tortured them. Or Lama Yeshe himself, who, when they asked, I think, or the story Venerable tells us, they asked Lama Yeshe what he thought of Mao Zedong, and he just says, oh, he means well, dear. Yeah, so these are the teachings that help our minds to get there. It doesn't come out of the blue. It's not like they were born that way, but it's simply from practicing these time-honored teachings that have been passed from teacher to student, practitioner to practitioner in this way, that they transform their minds. So by learning them, we can do the same, and that's something really wonderful. So it's helpful to have some background of the Buddhist worldview, and because we don't have that much time, I'm not going to go into that. I just want to point you again to these two books where there are opening chapters that have really, it's like one chapter you get the Buddhist worldview in an easy to understand English language nutshell. Definitely turn to these as resources, especially if you hear a lot of Sanskrit words that are very strange to you, like karma, and it's like, what's going on? Yep, you can ask a question or turn to these books. So we'll plunge straight into the poem. And the poem actually begins with what's called a traditional homage and promise to compose. Yeah, all the traditional Indian and Tibetan texts begin in this way. So I'll just start by reading that and commenting on each verse. So the Venerable Tokmei Sangpo begins. Yeah. Homage to Lokeshvara. I pay constant homage through my 3 doors to my supreme teacher and protector Chenrezig, who, while seeing all phenomena lack coming and going, makes single-minded effort for the good of living beings. So here Lokeshvara means the protector of the world. Yeah, so we begin right off with paying homage to Avalokiteshvara, that's Sanskrit for the Buddha of compassion, so also known as Chenrezig in Tibetan. And here we're looking at a being that is the physical embodiment of pure compassion. But like all Buddhas, he has all realizations. So basically it's a collection of inconceivable good qualities manifesting in this form, a physical form that we can interface with. Where otherwise it's like, I don't know, do you think of a word cloud in space with compassion, wisdom, like on the internet? I don't think that's as inspiring as, say, so maybe this is like the artistic version of that, perhaps. You can think of it that way, where each part of the deity's body represents a quality that they are manifesting in the world and that we can develop too. What I love about all these homages is how these masters, it represents their humility. They don't begin the poem with like, here are all the degrees I've had, P.S., or by the way, I've studied with blah, 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 and they always begin with a sign of respect to the whole lineage. They're saying, I pay homage with my body, speech, and mind to the teachers who've come before me, these awakened beings who have given these teachings. That's the source. And they're giving it out of love and compassion, not trying to make money off us, not trying to get something out of us, but just with this altruistic intention. Yeah, so immediately, I feel anyway, for me, it creates a sense of trust. Yeah, like, oh, here's someone who is writing this to try and benefit others. Let's hear what they have to say. And here, when he talks about Chenrezig combines wisdom and compassion. Yeah, he sees the nature of reality, right? All phenomena lacking inherent existence. And by combining that wisdom with compassion, he's able to then truly benefit all living beings. So there's a lot already in this one verse that will get unpacked in the subsequent verses, about what wisdom is, what compassion is, and how they work together. But for a start, it's just having this attitude of humility to the lineage of awakened beings and teachers who have come before us. And that's the attitude we want to have as we work with this poem. So usually after paying homage, then the author goes on to do what's called a promise to compose. So usually that's said to remove obstacles to composing a poem, right? It's a way for the author to create a lot of merit, and often he'll point out what his or her intention is in the poem. So the Venerable Tokmei Sangpo goes on to say, perfect Buddhas, source of all well-being and happiness, arise from accomplishing the excellent teachings. And this depends on knowing the practices. So I will explain the practices of Bodhisattvas. So here a Buddha is a being who has completely purified the mind of all negativities and developed all good qualities to their fullest extent. And a Bodhisattva is someone who wants to become a Buddha. And that's because you think that's the way to be of greatest benefit to all beings. In the context of the story we heard this morning, then it's someone who loves dung very much and is a master gardener, right? He's someone who says, whoopee, more fertilizer for my garden, because this is what will not only transform my mind, but enable me to help all beings in the same situation. The best part is, these are practices that all of us can actualize, that all of us can put into practice. I think that's what's the most hopeful about the Buddhist path. It's saying these are not far-off beings that, are in some other universe that will never meet or be able to attain their state, but we all have that potential to do that. And that's why he's saying in the promise to compose here. How do you become a Buddha? Well, how do you become someone who is the source of all well-being and happiness? you can actualize the teachings. How do you do that? That depends on knowing these practices. It's like, okay, so then he's going to explain that to help us. Yeah. So that's the entire motivation behind this poem. And that's why it's, so, to think that it's been circulated freely and passed on like this for decades and centuries suggests that it has moved so many people for it to survive. And we can do the same by putting it into practice in our lives. So this poem begins with step 1, just simply recognizing the preciousness and rarity of our present situation. Okay. So I'm just going to read the verse and go on with talking about it. So verse 1, having gained this rare ship of freedom and fortune, here think and meditate unwaveringly night and day in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of cyclic existence. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So that's the first practice. Just despite all the dung on the doorstep and everything else that appears insurmountable or discouraging, to come back and recognize that right this moment we are on a rare ship of freedom and fortune. We have everything we need right now to practice the path, to transform our minds, to become fully awakened Buddhas. And this in and of itself, I think, is a fantastic antidote to the discouraged, complaining mind. So anytime you find yourself, feeling overwhelmed just by looking at the news, I often feel that way. It's like, pause, what is actually happening in the situation I'm in right now? And very often we take for granted these qualities that are called the freedoms and fortunes. Yeah. So this is what our precious human life is endowed with. And I think when we meditate on it, it counteracts the view that nothing is going right, because we come back to look at what are these 8 freedoms and 10 fortunes. So there are many, many extensive teachings on this, not just in these 2 books, but in all the stages of the path teachings. But I will touch on the 8 freedoms and 10 fortunes very briefly for the benefit of people who've never heard this. And again, it's not necessarily the way we view ourselves and our lives. Yeah, I definitely didn't come into the world thinking, oh, I'm very fortunate and I have these freedoms. Yeah, I don't know. I was taught by the school system to be like, am I number 1? Oh, I'm number 10. What's up with that? And you're measuring yourself against people and that's how you define yourself. Or did they say I was a good child? Did I do a good job? Or you're always looking for some kind of external approval. Is it just me? That can't be right. Yeah. Am I getting the promotion? Did the boss like my work? Yeah. So none of that. We're not looking for our approval or the freedom and the fortune of our life in those sources. We're coming back to a very different source of measuring the value of our life. So these 8 freedoms, having a life that is, first of all, free from extreme suffering. Yeah, so that's free from being born in a hell realm, a hungry ghost, or an animal realm. Yeah, so here we have to, we could spend a long time talking about Buddhist cosmology and so forth, which we don't have time for, but just know that these are seen as states where beings' minds are so filled with suffering, whether it's the suffering of gross pain or craving or just dull ignorance where the only thing you think about is how to get food and who to mate with and that's it. The mind is so dull that it cannot think about creating virtue, or that it's so overwhelmed by anger and attachment that there's no space to even think, oh, could I do something to be of benefit? Or could I change this? Yeah, you're just stuck. Yeah, so none of us are in that state right now. Yeah? We're human. No matter what, we can think, yeah, can I pour a cup of tea for someone else? Yeah, sure. Small ways to benefit others are at our reach. Or just even having a positive thought. It's entirely possible in the next moment. So those are the first 3 freedoms. We're also free of being in a state where we're in such extreme happiness that we're totally intoxicated and likewise cannot think of benefiting others or growing in any way. So that's the long-lived God realm, the God realm. There are many different celestial being realms where it's said that you snap of your fingers and you get all of the things you want. But as we'll see in the coming verses, that doesn't necessarily help us, right? Because you're just distracted all the time and you're just thinking, I want more, I want more, I want more. And then it runs out, and then what? So we're free from that because there is enough suffering, enough dung on our doorstep to keep us focused on What do I need to do to transform this unsatisfactory state? We're also free of being born in a place where there is no Dharma. Right? All of us, everyone online, you're connecting with the Dharma right now. And that's said to be a very, very rare and precious situation. And so you can think about that in terms of the entire planet, right? To be human on this planet, to have any interest at all in spending a couple of hours or even up to a whole week listening to teachings. How many people want to do that? Just freely, out of joy, have that kind of interest. Or you could be born in a place with no religious freedom, where you have to secretly find a way, you're trying to hide your IP address or whatever, just to access teachings online that are about the Dharma. I mean, there are many people in that situation, and we are not. So we're also free from wrong views. So those are states of mind where we are completely certain that, there's no cause and effect, or nothing we do matters. Yeah, Buddhas, whatever, that's not possible. Yeah, so even if you have doubt, that's not like a wrong view that's so fixed that you would not even be interested in attending a teaching or listening or having an open mind. We're free from being born in a time where no Buddha has appeared, and we're free from having impaired faculties. Yeah, so basically we are able to listen, to see, to think. And even in modern times now, if you have difficulty seeing and hearing, there's the power of technology that supports that. So here the idea is that we have minds that are just able to listen and comprehend. So that links us to the 10 fortunes, right? Where basically we have human intelligence and potential. We have a mind that can think and process these teachings. We're born in a place where the Dharma exists. Even if we're not, we have the internet that connects us to it. We have good physical and mental faculties. We haven't committed such heavy negative deeds that would weigh our minds down. So some of these negative deeds are, for example, say killing your parents or harming a being that has spiritual realizations, harming a Buddha. So we've not done any of that would really obscure our minds. And as I've mentioned, we take interest in the Dharma. And we live at a time where a Buddha has appeared, taught the Dharma exists, and practitioners and kind supporters exist, and we are here to practice. That's amazing. Yeah, and we often take that for granted, no? And well, especially here, if you live in a monastery, it's like, oh yeah, that's how it is, la la la. I think especially in this time of pandemic, we see it's not, especially now that we're close to guests, it's not so easy to get here. The thing you took for granted, right? Yeah, it takes effort to get here. You have to create the causes, Yeah, it's not to be taken for granted. And it could disappear at any time. I guess I always think too about the Tibetan monastics, right? Who one day, someone comes and knocks at your door and says, the potala is being shelled, it's time to go. You get your cup, you get your pechas, you go to the mountains. And they will all say they all thought they were going to go back to the monastery in a few months. They've been in exile from, how long has it been now? 60 years? Yeah. So you really don't know. Yeah. But that the Dharma lives here. Yeah. Even without, you can shell the monastery, but the Dharma is here. And they carried it with them and they share it with us. So yeah, not to take this for granted at all. Especially if we've been swimming in the ocean of cyclic existence for eons, as this verse tells us. Yeah, battered by the waves of karma, and finally we are on a ship. So I don't know about you if you've been swimming, if you've ever gone swimming in the open ocean before. It is hard stuff, yeah. One of the most stupid things I did was when I was 15 with my cousins, and my one cousin is 18, one was 13, and we were wearing life vests and snorkeling by the beach in Indonesia, and mom's on the beach doing her thing, reading a book. And the three of us decide, we can't see anything here, let's swim out to the island over there. There will be a better view. Yes, all of you are already grimacing. The three of us were like, we are good swimmers, we could do this, we have life vests. We don't tell anyone. My youngest sister, who is 11, is like, I think that's a bad idea, I'm staying here. We're like, we are strong. Three of us are swimming our way happily to the island against the current. Somewhere in the middle, we're like, we're really tired. What do we do, right? Either you turn back, we're not talking to each other either, but it's hard. And the island is much further away than we thought. When out of the blue comes a ship. A boat comes from the middle of nowhere, and some random stranger is pulling us out of the water by our vests. So we get onto this boat, and there is my mother yelling her head off at us. Because she lost sight of her kids from the beach, right? And this poor woman does not speak any Bahasa Indonesia. She goes to some local person and is like, anak-anak, which is children. That's the only Malay word she knows. Children, water, help. Gets this boat out and finds us. And I will tell you, we were so grateful that she came. So it's kind of like that, no? There you are, thinking this ocean is like this pleasure grove, and you are so awesome and strong, and you're going to swim across and find wonderful things. And halfway through, you're like, this is a really bad idea. I could drown. There are strange animals. The waves are too much. Help. What do we do? And someone who has more wisdom and compassion gets on a boat and rescues us, with the good sense that we did not have. Yeah, so you get on the boat. What are you going to do? Be extremely grateful. Use your time on the boat well. Get to the shore. Yeah, you're not going to cut the engine and sunbathe or, start fishing. Yeah, no, okay? So that's what this verse is about. Yeah, you've been swimming in this ridiculous ocean that you thought was really an awesome place, but no, it is not. Yeah, sharks are coming and so forth. Finally, you are on this precious human life where you can listen to teachings and practice. Don't waste it. Yeah, that's what this whole poem is about. Do not waste it. Hear, think, and meditate unwaveringly night and day. Yep, so here this line is referring to formal learning and discussion and meditation, right? But really it's talking about how we can try and integrate the Dharma into all activities of daily life. Yep. So don't use this line to beat yourself up, okay? Like, oh, I have this precious human life and I'm not using every moment of it to unwaveringly meditate. Like, I've definitely done that. Don't go there. That is not Dharma practice. It's just saying, find ways to integrate what you've learned into every activity. Yeah, so I'm sure the later verses will introduce us to that idea too, like simple things we can do, like when you're vacuuming the floor, thinking, I'm cleaning the dirt from my mind, going up the stairs, oh, may I go to the upper realms and continue to practice? May I go to lower realms and help beings? And so forth. So we'll talk more about that in the coming days. So no matter what, even at this time, if you're stuck at home, if you've lost loved ones or your loved ones are sick, or if you've lost your job, if external circumstances seem really bleak, just come back to this. Remember, you have a precious human life. No matter where you are, no matter what situation you're in, you have all these freedoms and fortunes. You can practice. Yeah. So being aware of this, that helps to move us in a positive direction. Yeah. So definitely keep this meditation in your back pocket. But as the upcoming verses then tell us, what keeps us from making full use of this precious human life? Because I'm sure all of you have had that experience too, right? Of, phew, I'm on the boat. And after a while, it's like, it's kind of boring. Or is there something else I can do? Right? So these are all the habitual states of mind that just come back. We forget all the hard work it took to get just this brief opportunity to practice. So that's where verse 2 comes in. It says, attached to your loved ones, you're stirred up like water. Hating your enemies, you burn like fire. In the darkness of confusion, you forget what to adopt and discard. Give up your homeland. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So verse 2 gets right at the heart of what consumes our precious human life and turns it in the opposite direction to completely squander it. And that's the three poisons of attachment, anger, and confusion or ignorance that it's said we're habituated to over multiple lifetimes. So attachment really is just exaggerating the good qualities of something or projecting good qualities that are not there onto something. Yeah, so it's kind of like your mind creates this illusion and hallucination of wondrous, positive things that are not at all in the sight of the object, and you're like attached to your own hallucination. It's profoundly sad. And it's attachment to our own views and conceptions especially that make us miserable. At least that's how I felt very much this year. I would say I have a strong attachment to the idea of America. Yeah, I'm not even a citizen, but just the music I grew up listening to or movies I watched about this country or the brief time I spent at school here, I have a certain idea of America, right? So when I read the news about what's happening, I'm like, this is not supposed to be happening here. Yeah, like this is like supposed to be a developed country, a superpower, lots of people with intelligence, innovation, creativity, skills. We should be dealing with this pandemic differently. This is a democracy. The government is by the people, for the people. Then you read the news, it's like, what is going on? So just even that all this projection about what America is, right? What I imagine it should be always, is what's causing me misery. Because if I read the news or if I read, even academic research in sociology that's been happening for more than 20 years, so many people have been pointing out how the public health system in the country is broken. And it didn't happen overnight, right? It's a whole series of policies that have contributed to it. Community support systems are broken. And there are very deep problems with policing and systemic racism that are coming to the forefront now. But, it takes a long time for these causes and conditions to come together to the place we are in now. So I found at least just letting go of that hallucination of America and just coming back to the facts, I guess, or whatever we imagine facts to be these days. But looking at the long-term research, maybe that's where I consider the facts, right? People who don't have a political agenda, like there are a lot of sociologists who've been writing about different policies and their effects, reading about that and seeing, wow, that's the reality of, pursuing policies that don't benefit communities, that don't benefit society at large. And it will take time and collaboration to move in a different direction. Yeah. But I think for me, at least, the first step, coming off the kind of, exaggerated perspective and just trying to look at what's going on. This is a country like any other. There are good qualities and there are bad qualities. And, it's a huge mix of incredible human beings trying to live together and work together. And how do we harness that for collective good in the world? So that's clearly a process that's still unfolding. And then we have the opposite, right? Aversion, where we exaggerate the negative qualities of something or project negative qualities that aren't there. And as many of our monastics have shared in their Bodhisattvas Breakfast Corner talks, I think all year we've had those negative views about those people with different views than us, right? The people on the other side of the political divide. How could they possibly believe that? Those people are insane, they are ruining the country, and so forth. Just recently in our lovely little local paper, the Newport Miner, there's the editorial section this week is kind of interesting. I don't know if that's been the case always, but it's pretty much that, a raging debate between people with different views, descending sometimes to name-calling, unfortunately, saying, how could so-and-so believe that this candidate is good? And so the debate rages on. But really, this is not realistic or helpful either. Just to come back to how we are exaggerating the negative qualities of people, right? They are just like us. They want to be happy and they don't want to suffer. Just because they have a different idea or believe something different doesn't make them evil, scum of the earth, can't speak to you ever. So when you catch your mind going in that direction, it's like, hold up, come back, calm down. What's helped me a lot this year, I think, is also trying to imagine people who see me that way, right? So, for example, people who are terrified of foreigners, right? So I am a foreigner, right? Who think foreigners are overrunning America. They're taking away my opportunities. They're taking away my birthright. Build a wall, keep them out. And just really sitting and trying to understand where they're coming from, that I will appear as an enemy to them. I think I'm still working on that very much. And I'll always remember watching a documentary about what happened in Charlottesville. And what really struck me was when I watched, groups of young, healthy, energetic young men who are in the prime of their life, marching with torches, yelling, "You will not replace us." Somehow that just broke my heart. The idea that there's so much fear, these are people with opportunities that they don't see. You are so healthy. You are at the peak of your youth. You are the dominant race of this country. And you're so scared. It's like, I don't get why. I wanted to hug all these guys. Because just hearing, you will not replace us. I was like, who is this enemy they're imagining that's coming in to like replace them? You know, like if you really look at the numbers, a lot of immigrants are coming to take jobs that nobody wants to do, right? The 3Ds, right? Dirty, dangerous, and I don't know what the last one is. But yeah. So anyway, I just felt, wow, you know, it's really how we see ourselves in our situation. But to be caught in this kind of aversion, you know, where again you fabricated an enemy from your, it's not in these immigrants coming across the border who just want to, you know, help themselves, their families, and society. Somehow, you know, you're imagining that they're going to squeeze you out, replace you, annihilate you, when that is not the case at all. Yeah. So anyway, my deep wish was for these young men to see their own good qualities, yeah, to see that they have every opportunity. They're not being replaced. And then we come to confusion, yeah, where we're basically bouncing between attachment and aversion. We don't know what to adopt to bring us happiness, and we don't know what to discard that brings us suffering, yeah, right? Because we don't have a realistic view of the world, right? You're either blowing things out of proportion in terms of exaggerating good qualities, or you're exaggerating negative qualities. It's like, you know, it's kind of amazing to think, yeah, without meeting the Dharma, you're like interfacing with this house of mirrors. You know, it's really a huge fantasy. So instead of doing that with our entire precious human life, his advice is for us to give up our homeland. So here we're not talking about, I don't know, cutting off your hair and just giving up your bank account and flying to the next monastery you can find. We're closed. Give up your homeland is an internal process. Yeah, where Venerable Chögyön writes beautifully about this in that chapter in Don't Believe Everything You Think, where she talks about how we are removing from our mind the views, attitudes, and emotions that form the familiar homeland of cyclic existence. This is all the internal conditioning that we grew up with. And that's really hard. Yeah, when I first started to recognize this, I felt like I was a fish trying to see water. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the stuff that's the fabric of your identity and existence. You know, this is how I was taught to be a good person. You know, be number one. Keep things for yourself. Yeah. Well, my parents share with your sister only, not those other people, right? So things that were like the key principles of your life that as a child maybe you couldn't question, or if you questioned, you were scolded, right? Only as adults now we can look back and say, wow, that's the conditioning we had. And now as someone who's learned something about what wisdom and compassion means, I can check up. Is this conditioning helpful to me? Is this really how I want to keep living my life? Or do I recognize there are situations that are actually making myself and others miserable? So Venerable in the book, Don't Believe Everything You Think, talks too about how we remove ourselves from familiar situations that are dysfunctional. You know, instead of replaying the same old argument that you get into every time you see your parents on the holidays or whatever it is, you know, you're back together with your siblings and you're going to start comparing how you raise your kids and so on. Instead of putting yourself back there, that homeland that you think is just familiar and useful, it's like, step back. Yeah, are there other ways I can relate that are not going to bring so much suffering to myself and others? So that's the work of giving up our homeland. You know, calming down the exaggeration of good and bad qualities and just trying to see yourself and others as sentient beings, trying to be happy and not suffer, right? And undoing all this internal conditioning too, right? And checking up what's beneficial, what's not. So I would say during this time of social distancing, especially over the holidays, this is a good time for internal remodeling, is what Venerable calls it. You know, where we can check up. You know, we're not in those triggering situations. So even if you might find yourself in an unfamiliar situation, right, maybe missing those family traditions, this is also a chance for you to take some space, right, to see, yeah, maybe it's not so bad that we're pretending to like all the food that each other brought when really we can't stand the taste of it and are just pretending to be polite, right? It's like, do I want to live my life in this way? How can I come back to relating to myself and others with more authenticity? So I think verse 2 starts to point us in that direction. So now we come to verse 3 that talks about how to support us in giving up our homeland. So we can start by avoiding bad objects, right? Disturbing emotions will gradually decrease. Without distraction, virtuous activities naturally increase. With clarity of mind, conviction in the teaching arises. Cultivate seclusion. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. And here, in all the commentaries, they'll always emphasize that when we talk about bad objects, the fault is not in the object itself, right? You're not like, oh, that's bad, throw it away, get it out of my life. We're talking about being aware of things, people, or places that kind of water the seeds of our disturbing emotions, or because we're beginners in our practice and our mind is easily uncontrolled, when we connect with these objects, once there's contact, the mind just goes, right, off on its affliction, right? And it's a very humbling process to recognize, right? So you're like me and my cousins, like, yeah, we're strong, we can do this. And then you get in the water, it's like, nah, no help, right? So if you've had enough experience of that and you're quite clear, these objects I can't handle right now, step back, right? You don't have to blame the people or things, but just know, okay, when I'm in this situation, when my sister and I are talking about blah, blah, I know I'm gonna get triggered. So I come prepared, right? Either with a plan, or I've rehearsed it, or I think, how can I deal with this situation in a way that will be kind or helpful to my mind? If not hers, at least my own. And what I find very intriguing and maybe also hopeful about the second line is that it says, without distraction, virtuous activities naturally increase. I need to say, it took me some time to get some kind of confidence in this. The idea that if I'm not distracted, naturally my mind will tend toward virtue. I don't know, I'm like, really? I don't have that much confidence in my own abilities or my own inner goodness, sounds too new age. So this is something to check up in your own experience. When you are less distracted, does your mind tend toward virtue? Just check up. Do it every day. I will say what got me to the cushion was seeing that was happening. I used to meditate only 3 minutes a day. That was all I could handle because I was so like this. And in the 3 minutes, I'd be like checking the clock. Like, okay. Because I was always double scheduled with my phone on and, listening to music, trying to do something. So like, oh, sit for 3 minutes. So quiet, what to do? But I found it helped me to create space in my life. I just found that I was less reactive. That came as a real surprise, like I would interact with people and instead of just blurting things out or responding on automatic, for some reason the 3 minutes contributed to me being able to pause and just say, oh, do I really want to say that? Or is this really how I want to respond? So that was just one small thing I started to notice in my daily activities. And eventually over time, I started to meditate maybe 10 minutes a day and so on. There was a period I fell sick at college, so I was here in the US all alone, far from home, and you don't want to tell your mom you're sick when you're away because she will freak out, as I've told with the boat. You can imagine my mom. If I told her I was sick, she might fly over immediately. So it's like, no, meditation helped. I was really surprised. I just came back to my breath, the sickness passed, it wasn't serious. Oh, wow, it helped, No one had to wig out. So little moments like this that I could see, that without distraction, my mind naturally calmed down, it naturally moved toward what was beneficial. And eventually I stopped arguing all the time with my mom, so that was a big turning point and what really got me to the cushion. So check up for yourself, especially now, if you have a lot more time to yourself, do you find your mind tends toward what is beneficial and virtuous, right, when you let go of your distractions? So here I would say bad objects are likely to be different for each person at different times, for yourself as well. So that's just something to pay attention to as you practice. So for some people it might be drugs and alcohol. For some people it might be video games. I will say for myself, this year it has been reading the news. I really didn't expect that. You're thinking, yeah, it'll be fine. Just at the Abbey, we have guidelines to read, 20 minutes a week or something. We're laughing because sometimes this year it's like 20 minutes a day. And you're like, the news has been designed to keep us hooked. Especially the American news, I need to say, I don't know, here I am generalizing about all American news, but it always seems to be so disaster-driven and sensationalist. After a while, I just switched to reading the Singapore news, which is kind of dull and factual reporting. That's really all I need to know. I don't need to have the alarming kind of view, country falling apart all the time. It's so read different sources. That can help too, to see what's actually happening. But why? Why do we want to take time to identify these bad objects and to take some space from them? Some of them are so enjoyable, right? Don't you want to just spend hours and hours playing video games where you kill other beings? What fun! Why? Because our life is short. And this precious human life that we have worked so hard to gain can disappear like that. And that's what verse 4 is about. So it says, "Loved ones who have long kept company will part. Wealth created with difficulty will be left behind. Consciousness, the guest, will leave the guest house of the body. Let go of this life. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas." So, if we want to develop genuine compassion and wisdom, then we have to have a realistic perspective on our reality, on how things are for ourselves and others. So in this verse, it points out all the things that we might spend our entire lives running after because we think they bring us happiness, but they don't. So, we want love and approval from everyone around us, everyone. Not a single person is allowed to dislike me or disapprove of me. Every single one must love me forever. Or we think that success is all about getting rich, buying whatever we want, having a great reputation. Think of all the effort people make into making money, right? Get up at 3 a.m. to chop vegetables, to run your store. Countless things that we do to accumulate a little bit of wealth that is not going to come with us at the time of death. Or the third line, to see the body as a guest house, right? So think too about all the effort we put into making the body look good. Working out, making sure, taking your measurements. Did people ever do that? I had a friend who was her brother was really into bodybuilding. And I remember he had a list of all his ideal measurements on the fridge. The bicep this month increased by 1 inch. That was the goal. So do how many reps? And of course, it's pasted on the fridge so he wouldn't overeat. And I was like, wow, that takes a lot of effort, But that was the goal. Biceps, how many inch by X week? That's what we do, thinking that this thing is going to bring us some happiness. I don't know what big biceps are going to get you in life, but he must have known. I have no idea. But we have to ask, right? Do these things last? Do they bring us true happiness or do they just make us suffer? One thing that really struck me too about reading more news this year, there was actually, reading the Singapore paper more often than the US one, there was actually a period, there was a spate of celebrity suicides in Asia, one after another in a matter of weeks. And it was quite chilling to see the pictures in the paper, mainly because, these are celebrities who are in the prime of life. They look so successful and happy. They're on the cover, and underneath it says that they have died by suicide. And they were all around my age, 37. And it just hit me wow, that's the end of their career as a celebrity, right? You get into this business when you're 15 to 18, right? You're milked, or you milk it for what it's worth in your 20s. And nobody wants to look at you on screen beyond the age of 30. 37, you're a has-been. Your life is over. Nobody wants to look at you anymore. Their attention has gone to the next 15-year-old. That's really, really sad. And just to see these people, again, not recognize the value of their lives. To see that there's so much potential, they have so much going for them. Instead, despite having everything you could possibly want, good looks, wealth, popularity, 1 million likes on Instagram or whatever, doesn't mean anything, doesn't bring any genuine happiness. I think they were all said, they were all deeply depressed, right? You don't know who your real friends are. People just want money from you or sex from you. And there's all this pressure to keep up a facade. There were all these accounts of, especially in Asia, it seems, there's a lot of like online bullying and criticism of celebrities. So these poor people would be like reading their own people's comments about them. You make a small social boo-boo and it's like 1,000 people telling you how horrible you are. So you read all this garbage online and you believe it, right? Thinking, I'm worthless. And that's just so sad. It is the total opposite of the meditation on the value of a precious human life, right? To remember, hey, your value is in your inner qualities and your ability to work with your mind. And none of this nonsense that's outside of you. So I think that's where reflecting on impermanence can actually really help us, right? To get real about what matters in life. If you find yourself getting depressed, for example, just meditating on how you might lose your loved ones or lose your wealth, remember the purpose of this verse is to help us to set our priorities straight. Instead of wasting our time trying to build this house of cards that is not going to bring us any happiness, to instead put our time into what we can take to the next life, right? Which are our good qualities. That's what we believe as Buddhists. The positive actions we've done, the positive habits of mind that we've cultivated, that's what's going to come with us, and that's what's going to continue to help us. And I would say we are living in a time where the teaching on impermanence is like this in front of us, right? Where we're seeing it happen every single day. There are thousands of people dying worldwide of COVID. I would say I've thought a lot this year about the life story of the Buddha, right? Where when he was Prince Siddhartha, what really inspired him to get going on his path to seek the truth of full awakening was seeing a sick person, an aging person, and then a dead person, and then also seeing a spiritual practitioner. So, what does it take for this teaching to sink in? Yeah, we've all seen sick people. We've all seen aging people, I believe. We've seen dead people. And then we're like, okay, going on with life. Not gonna happen to me. Meh, whatever. Check stock market. It sounds like a really simple teaching, but for it to sink in, I'll always remember when Venerable Minja was here, she said, the Buddha, Siddhartha, had so much merit. Right? His mind was already so predisposed in that direction that the moment he saw a sick person, it was like, bam, whoa, that could be me. I am not free of sickness. We got to do something about this. Yeah. So for this teaching to sink in, takes a lot of effort on our part too. So really make space for that, I would say, during this time. Instead of numbing out maybe and thinking, oh yeah, okay, all these people are dying, whatever, it's not me, it's not going to happen to me. Sit with it, yeah? What is this pandemic teaching all of us about the nature of our life, about how we run our societies? What can we bring forward into the coming years? Okay. So going on to verse 5, that we can read in conjunction with 5 and 6 together. So we continue to take a long, hard look at the objects that trigger our afflictions in verse 5. That again, distract us from this hard teaching, right? You're like, oh yeah, I could get sick, I could die. Can we play mahjong? Whatever it is. So, verse 5, when you keep their company, your 3 poisons increase. Your activities of hearing, thinking, and meditating decline. And they make you lose your love and compassion. Give up bad friends. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So here I think we're getting into a bit more detail around one of these bad objects, right? Here pointing primarily to people who influence us in a way that is opposite to our ethical values and our spiritual aspirations. Yeah, so these are the people we're labeling bad friends temporarily in relation to our spiritual goals. Okay, but again, it's not that we are averse, we don't develop an attitude of hatred and aversion to them. I think the label is meant to just help us be mindful, to be careful, knowing that, hey, if I spend a lot of time with people who feed our afflictions, who encourage me to do things that are against my values, that's what I'm gonna do, right? It's like, I'm not some superpower, again, so strong, I'm gonna hang out with them, but I'm gonna keep my integrity intact. We are susceptible to peer pressure, all of us. And two, these are people who are so familiar. They're part of the homeland. They have kept us company for a long time, right? We want their approval. And so we spend our time doing all the things they want us to do. We lie for them, right? We might engage in, hey, let's go fishing. That's how we spend our time together. We kill other beings with them. So many negativities that we create just to be around these friends, right? And they take us away from activities like hearing, thinking, and meditating because they think it's boring, meaningless. So this verse is just alerting us, right? Again, instead of getting caught up with all those activities of attachment, hold up, remember your values, come back to your center. And this is really hard too. Now, I feel this is a question that comes up for everybody who's kind of entering into a Buddhist path. It always comes up like, what do I do with these old non-Buddhist friends or non-Dharma friends, How do I interact with them? How do I relate to them? For me, it was that I had friends who from elementary school stayed in touch all the way through high school. It was a really tight group. And at a certain point, they were meeting every week to play mahjong and gamble. And I thought it was the most boring thing in the world. I really don't like doing that on Sundays, but it was like the thing, right? The group's getting together, you have to come. And eventually I just plucked up the courage and said, this is just not what I want to do on a weekend, And they don't want to be coming to the theater and watching plays. So, there was a lot of upset, there was a lot of anger, but eventually I think we found a compromise. Where I said, look, I'll meet people one-to-one or in small groups. I enjoy your company, I like talking to you. I just don't want to sit around for hours playing mahjong and gambling. I hate gambling. I don't like that idea. So it took some time to work out. But I do think that no matter what, our true friends, good friends, will be happy to accommodate. If they truly value our company or they want to see us grow in our good qualities, that's a true friend. Not the ones who are like, do or die, you must listen to me. Like something's wrong there if those are the conditions on the friendship, right? So if you're fearful of change, if you're fearful of losing the people you love, hold up and just check too, what is the cost to your values of this relationship, and is it worth the price? Or are there other ways you can make your needs known, find some kind of good balance for you and the other party? So it doesn't mean they have to take an interest in the Dharma overnight and come meditate with you, but if they respect that, if they give you the space to do that, you find ways to work it out. So again, I would say, in this time of, social distancing, it just gives us so much space to look at who we spend our time with and the effect that has on our life. So in verse 6, we come to the good friends. The ones who really want to see us grow, who celebrate when we grow in love and compassion. So it says, when you rely on them, these good friends, your faults come to an end, and your good qualities grow like the waxing moon. Cherish spiritual teachers even more than your own body. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So in the last 2 weeks, we've had really wonderful reviews on relying on a qualified spiritual teacher, really the best friend of all, the representative of the Buddha in a time where the Shakyamuni Buddha has already passed away. So you can refer to Venerable Chini and Venerable Jigme's reviews from the Foundation of Buddhist Practice about this. But in essence, the idea is the same. The friends we surround ourselves with, that we model ourselves after, that's who we're going to become. Right? So here we really want to try and find a qualified spiritual teacher. And the key qualities are, this is a person who keeps good ethical conduct, whose mind is tamed, who is knowledgeable about the path to awakening, and who models love and compassion in action in daily life. Someone we can hopefully connect with in person, who we can observe. So I don't know about you, we've all had role models in life, right? That's who we look up to or who we hope to become like. I will say a big piece of why I decided to ordain was, when I looked at some of the bosses in my life, I thought, this is not who I want to be in my 40s. materially very successful. I had a boss who had, I think the family drove 2 cars. They had many little children that she was pushing very hard. The tiniest one had a resume coming out of kindergarten because he had to get into the best boys' school, and the next one was training in dance and all kinds of things to get into the best girls' school. She was always so stressed out, but she was extremely capable in her late 30s. Yeah, I thought, this is not who I want to become. Driving 2 cars, no time to spend with the kids, pushing the kids, rostering the grandparents. No. Yeah, so look very carefully, right, about who your role models are, right? The people around you who seem to be leaders or models of success, and just check, is that the direction you want to be going towards? And if not, look out for other role models to learn from. Yeah. And it says here that we cherish them even more than our own body. I think this very much relates to verse 4, in reminding us that this body betrays us at the time of death. Yeah, but the spiritual teacher is someone who leads us to full awakening, who the relationship with us, they are going to guide us for many, many lifetimes. Yeah. So that's how I understand this line. It's not about giving up all good sense, and giving everything to the teacher. Cherish more than your body, die for the teacher, whatever. No, that's not what this line is about. It's just appreciating that this is a relationship that's going to help us for a very long time. This person is going to show us how to transform our minds, not just in this life, but in many, many future lives. And I would say, no matter what, as a touchstone, to remember that a qualified teacher only wants us to benefit ourselves and others. So if ever a teacher you barely know is asking you to do things that are against your values or strange, or really give up your body, meet me by the swimming pool naked, please, check up. Is this beneficial to me or sentient beings? Really? Yeah. This person may not be a qualified spiritual mentor, just because you've heard them speak once or twice and they're very charismatic. So I think that's something to always bear in mind. That these verses that encourage this devotion and cherishing the teacher are also balanced by reason. There's a whole set of teachings about checking their good qualities and taking time to cultivate such a relationship. Yeah. So that's because you can't take refuge in an ordinary being. And you can't read their minds, right? You don't know this person's realizations. And that's why you just need time to check up their daily behavior, check up what their students are like before you make that kind of commitment. And even then, if you thought of your spiritual teacher as your emotional refuge, it's just not going to happen that way, as you've heard in the reviews. Their job is to show us how to work with our own minds. Yeah. So now we come to verse 7 about the flaws of all these worldly refuges. I think are all encapsulated in this one verse, which says, bound himself in the jail of cyclic existence, what worldly god can give you protection? Therefore, when you seek refuge, take refuge in the 3 jewels that will not betray you. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So as we've mentioned, Buddhist cosmology is kind of complex with many different realms, and one of these realms are a realm of celestial beings. So these are the worldly gods, right? They may have supernormal powers, they may have deep powers of concentration, but fundamentally they are not free from cyclic existence. They still get reborn. The idea is that someone who's created a lot of virtue, made a lot of aspirations to go to a celestial realm, can be born there. They might have a lifespan of eons and eons there, but eventually that good karma runs out. Yeah, even a worldly god falls down back to the animal realm, the human realm. And that's a source of tremendous suffering, right? Where they see, oh my goodness, right now I have this amazing body of light and whatever I want. My next life I'm going to become a pig, and it's like tremendous mental torment, right? Seeing that happen. But I think this verse, more importantly, points out to all the worldly gods that we take refuge in day to day. People that we are attached to, right? Money, reputation, our career, everything these verses have been talking about. This is where we find safety, comfort. We think gives our lives meaning. We invest so much time, and they disappoint us again and again and again. So what we want to do is to turn to the three jewels that will not betray us, because they help us to become the three jewels ourselves. Here I just wanted to read 2 paragraphs from this really wonderful refuge prayer that's in the Pearl of Wisdom Blue Book, right, that our lay friends do on the full moon and new moon days. Tomorrow is a full moon, or one of those, new moon. Okay, tomorrow is the new moon, yeah, so we will take precepts in the morning, and our lay friends will be reciting this renewal of refuge and precepts. So that's something you can do for sure at home. It's in the Blue Book, and it's on Venerable's website too. But let me just read you these 2 paragraphs that, for me anyway, back then was a good reminder of what refuge means. So here Venerable Children writes, "From beginningless time until the present, in my attempt to find happiness, I have been taking refuge. But the things I have relied upon have not been able to bring the lasting state of peace and joy that I seek. Until now, I have taken refuge in material possessions, money, status, reputation, approval, praise, food, sex, music, and a myriad of other things. Although these things have given me some temporal pleasure, they lack the ability to bring me lasting happiness, because they themselves are transient and do not last long. My attachment to these things has in fact made me more dissatisfied, anxious, confused, frustrated, and fearful. So seeing the faults of expecting more from these things that they can give me, I now turn for refuge to a reliable source that will never disappoint me. The Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I take refuge in the Buddhas as ones who have done what in the depths of my heart I aspire to do, purified their minds of all defilements and brought to fulfillment all their positive qualities. I take refuge in the Dharma, the cessation of all undesirable experiences and their causes, and the path leading to that state of peace. I take refuge in the Sangha, those who have directly realized reality and who want to help me do the same." And then this refuge prayer goes on to talk about how it's not just the outer 3 jewels that we want to rely on. The whole point of our practice is to actualize the inner 3 jewels, right? To completely purify our minds and develop all our good qualities, to actualize all the stages of the path, to help others along the way. Like, we will become that refuge for others. We will become the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And how amazing is that? So yes, we've looked at these first 7 verses. We see that faced with a pile of dung, we can shovel. And these verses are about how basically stop adding to the pile of dung. Stop wading deeper into it. Yeah, put your back into it and let's go. Okay, so we have a little bit of time for people to express questions that I may just pass to the next person. But yes, I will try and respond to.
It's a comment about this last verse, the idea of betrayal. I feel like that's been a theme throughout my life. I feel like I've been betrayed so many times. And it goes back to having these wrong expectations, basically expecting things to provide lasting happiness that they can. And then I get angry. I blame them, where, it's really, I need to change how I'm thinking. It's so, I've carried a lot of anger and betrayal and victimhood around just from these wrong views.
Which teaching do we have where, attachment is said to be like, it's pretending to be your best friend, but actually it's just been like selling your furniture without telling you, sleeping with your wife, that's attachment, right? The thing, that state of mind you think is your very best friend, that's gonna get you everything you want and need in life, and it's completely ruining you. Yeah, I think that's the pain of cyclic existence. When we see that, we weep. With compassion for ourselves, really, and others that we see are in the same situation.
Someone is asking, could you please comment on let go of this life, especially for someone living as a layperson?
I think the next meditation will help illuminate that. We'll be doing some meditation on what are called the 8 worldly concerns. So basically, it's about letting go of concerns and attachment to things that last only for this lifetime. Yeah, so that's something you could do as a layperson or as a monastic, right? It doesn't mean you literally have to like give up your family, give up your job, but it's how you relate to these objects that is the key. Yeah, just remembering, hey, as a practitioner, I have a big view. Just my relationships with these few people, my relationships with my workplace, my one career, that's not the be-all and end-all of who I am and my value in the world. Right? The Tibetan term for Buddhist is nangpa, right? An inner being, someone who looks inward. So what you're remembering is that my refuge and my resource is internal, in the good qualities, in the teachings. Yeah, I'm not so caught up with the appearances of this life, with the 8 worldly concerns, which is what we're going to hear about later. So the whole purpose of my life is not just to make money, be happy, have the best sex life, have the best body, get the nice car, which is what a lot of other people's worldly concerns are, right? But as a lay practitioner, you're coming back to something else. Yeah, the value of my life comes in being of benefit to others in whatever way I can, with whoever is around me, whether it's how I relate to my children, helping them have maybe a balanced view of life, how I relate to my spouse, how I relate to people at work, just bringing those teachings into our daily lives in that way, while also keeping this broad view, right? That helps us to keep our priorities straight. Yeah. So here it's letting go of attachment to this life is primarily what it is. Because once you're stuck there, then you'll step on whoever it is to get ahead, right? That's attachment to this life versus, hold up, I want to keep good ethical conduct. I want to be of benefit to others. How do I relate to them?
Someone else asks, how to let go of the raft of attachment to the teaching, teacher, spiritual friends? I'm not sure how to frame the question, but is that kind of attachment the last thing to let go of?
The raft?
The raft.
Raft
Sorry.
of attachment. Oh, okay. I don't know if it's the last thing to let go of. I mean, they say that the hardest ones to let go of are your attachment to your reputation, right, or your views. So that might be something. I don't know if that's going on for you. But, so again, I always come back to the definition of attachment. Exaggerating the good qualities and positive qualities of something. They are not at all in the object. Or they might be in the object, but I've blown them out of proportion. So how do you know if you're attached to your teacher? Is if you're expecting things that they could not possibly do. Like, read your mind and tell you how to fix all your life's problems. No, that is not what your teacher is going to do, right? So we're coming back to the teachings or expecting that of your spiritual friends. They will all have perfect ethical conduct. Everybody in the Dharma Center we're never going to disagree on how to do things with each other. We're going to have these perfect Dharma relationships and live happily ever after. Has anyone been to such a center here? Not even at the monastery, right? Every day we say a prayer that differences in ideas and ways of doing things may arise. They are not the source of conflict, right? So we see that, but that's attachment. That's when attachment to your teacher or your spiritual friends is coming up. You're expecting something totally unrealistic that no being can realize. Yeah. I think we all have that, and that's why a lot of people come to the monastery, and after about 3 months, it's like, oh, you're like, no, you're just seeing all the attachment and wrong expectations you had. Let go of those. This is a good place to practice. Here's a broom. Yeah. One last one. Okay.
Sometimes I feel too much pressure when talking about this precious human life, as if I don't do my best next time I will be born in hell or something. It makes me expect too much of myself.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really helpful about the Lamrim teachings. They always there's always a conclusion in the guided meditation list. So definitely familiarize yourself with those conclusions. That if you do the meditation or you hear the teaching and you come out more anxious, the mind has gone to the wrong conclusion. Yeah, it's meant to help us appreciate the situation we have and to just do our best to use it well. But I totally resonate. I had one retreat where I was meditating a lot on precious human life, and somewhere by week 2, I'm like, can't sleep, must use every moment to study. It's like, and the whole community is like, can she just relax? It's like, so, did not benefit me or the people around me. Just saying, don't go there. Check the conclusion. Happy, grateful mind, doing practice in a balanced way. Yeah, that's really all it is. It's not that complicated. Yeah.